All right, everyone. Happy Friday. Happy pre-happy hour. It's actually pre-happy hour. It's only 2:00 Eastern time here in Western New York. The Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live September 6th, 2024. Matthew, we're back. We are back. And I'm just noticing, by the way, that we're not able to blast this out live on Twitter. So, I just got to connect this real quick. Okay. So had to do a quick edit there on the fly, but the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is live. Here we are. Matthew, it's been a little bit since you and I have been together. So I guess we'll try to get some people here to trickle in for those on YouTube. We probably should pop that link out on the fly, Matthew. If you want to pop that out,
tweet
I'll
it out,
retweet it.
and
But
it
you
looks
did.
like I'm being told by StreamYard that I need a premium account on X to create live broadcasts now. So that might be our problem, why we weren't blasted out live. But I did send out the link to the YouTube on Twitter.
All right, well, then I'll put it out right now.
In.
Hey, it's preseason for us too, everyone. So we're going to work out some kinks. We'll send Elon a note on what we think about that. I thought about getting Twitter Premium anyways. Not for that stupid check mark. I would actually hide the check mark. I just want to write these really long tweets. I think it'd be really fun to write like these books that people seem to publish there. But no, at any rate, good to see your smiling face. You're back in action. Good to see your byline on theathletic.com. But yes, while people are tricking in, if you could please like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can find the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you could please leave a 5-star review. Matthew, we did pick up some 5-star reviews, I noticed. I was in our little sabbatical looking at numbers and things like that. And we do have some people leaving us reviews. So if you are one of those in the audience that has left us a review, we thank you for that. Always appreciate it. And we just need more of you to do that. So if you could get in there, leave 5 stars and say whatever you want. Talk about my hairdo or Matthew's hot takes, whatever you want. But Matthew, it's been a little bit, man. Summer. How was your summer? Let's just talk a little bit about life real quick. How was your summer? What'd you do? Anything fun? I'll tell you what I did real quick. It was real easy. I hit some really cool golf courses with work, and I started drinking bourbon. Bourbon.
Two big developments. I feel like those go hand in hand. You hit cool golf courses and you drink bourbon, right? You start to rub shoulders with certain people, and you start to become a bourbon guy. So I'm happy for you.
I got a new boss, and it's like a requirement of me being on that team that I have to become a bourbon drinker. So there we go. But yeah, Basil Hayden. And I got a bottle of Whistle Pig. I'm not going to be one of these like crazy bourbon guys, but I do like having a more robust bar here at home. That's been like the biggest benefit, I think, of me sipping bourbon. I still don't love it. I don't like Manhattans. I like old fashions. I like sweet. I like orange. And I love eating those cherries. But I just like looking at all the bottles. The aesthetics of being in the bourbon game is fun. But that's it. Oh, the golf courses, by the way. I've been playing like shit, by the way. I'm not playing great golf. Recently, I've had a couple good rounds, but very inconsistent. But I got out to the Philadelphia Cricket Club, the oldest sports club in the United States. Played a round of golf there. Awesome place. The PGA Tour is going to be there next year. And just a couple weeks ago, I went back to Firestone for the second time. Stayed in the clubhouse this time. The last time I was at Firestone, I stayed out in the villas. Like this little complex of townhouses that are around the course. This one I stayed right in the clubhouse. They have like 10 rooms in the clubhouse. It was cool. I stayed in the Olafable suite. So very cool. Cool experience.
This is why we need a producer so they could post the videos that you were sending me from the lodging. Pretty cool setup. As somebody who has not played a round of golf in over a year, I was pretty jealous of some of your summer exploits. We still got to squeeze in some rounds here before hockey season starts, but with we
got about a week.
Yeah, well, that's true. Hockey starts, so who knows? Maybe we can get some fall golf in, and we'll see what the early season has in store. But it was busy over here with the chasing the little ones around. Got to use up the last of my parental leave during a quiet time on the calendar. And it was busy. We got out to Maine, for a week to see some family out there. And other than that, was just enjoying another great weather summer here in Western New York and getting some good family time in after, everybody that listens to the show knows that our son was born pretty much right in the middle of the season, which made for a hectic middle of the season and end of the season. So it was nice to slow down and spend some time.
Well, it's good to have you back, man. We are going to be pretty regular now from here on in. So hopefully you enjoyed your time off, because I'm going to be crawling up your pant leg multiple times a week saying, let's go, let's get live, let's get some content out there, let's talk hockey. It was really good, just kind of being in the summertime and not having the show. I kind of missed it. It became part of the routine. It became just part of like the rhythm of my life of like having, at least once a week, multiple times a week, though often, just getting together, talking about the team. You're down there every day. I'm not. I'm in my own little prospect vortex. Getting together with you for an hour, we'd say an hour, and it was always like an hour and a half. But that was kind of like the way to kind of just level set what was going on with the team for me. Had an idea, but you got to kind of add a little more color. So, and I think that's how the fans are seeing this show as well. So I missed you, and I'm glad to have you
Likewise.
back. And I'm not drinking bourbon today, but I'm double fisting. I have coffee. And I'll put the mug on the screen because it's kind of relevant to today. Let's keep the dumb blank to the minimum today, Matthew. There is a little not bourbon, Bailey's in there. And I got my water bottle. My girlfriend got me a water bottle, and it's the best thing ever. It goes everywhere with me.
That's the other thing, that the other development in your summer. You're a bourbon guy and a water guy, which is a good balance.
Yeah, I'm a water guy. That's right.
Kris has been drinking a lot of water. He tells me it's given him a lot more energy. I've become a very slow jogger, which is giving me some more energy. So this could be a peppier season too of the Baker Fairburn hockey show. Definitely missed talking about this team, talking about this sport with you. We've already kind of started doing that the last couple of weeks as some of your prospect watching has begun with the leagues overseas. And I feel like we didn't miss a whole lot while we were out, but now it's starting to get to that point where you can safely say the off season is pretty close to complete, right? There's still time for moves to be made, but we have a pretty good picture of what this team is going to look like. Next week, they start practices for Prospect Challenge tournament that starts next weekend. And the week after that, I believe let me pull my calendar up. The 18th, Wednesday, looks like the first day of training camp practice. So they will practice through that. They have a few preseason games, and I believe it is either the 24th or the 25th. Somewhere in there is when they leave for Germany to finish their training camp out there, and then they head to Prague that weekend. And before we know it, they'll be opening the season with the Global Series against the Devils. So fun times ahead.
Yeah, we'll have to, maybe next week or, leading up to that whole, like, I think if we have a little bit of time right after the Prospects Challenge, and then when they're getting into camp, I think we got to talk about a little more the European component to this. And just, I haven't really I got to look at it like the schedule of the games versus when they leave and kind of get a better idea. You've been looking at it more. I'm not all the way there yet with fully understanding like how they're going to do that, how many players are going to take with them to Europe, just the logistics part of it. We should definitely cover that down the road. But you mentioned, are they done? And I think that's probably a good place to start today. Enough about us. No one cares that I drink bourbon.
Especially when you're not actually doing it on the show, right? Which I assume will, given the long nature of an 82 game season, I'm assuming you'll have a bourbon in hand for a post game show or two at some point. But Friday afternoon at 2:00 was a little would have been maybe a touch early, but
a little aggressive.
You're on vacation.
But not unheard of. But I'll tell you what, if the team starts this year like they started last year, that there might be some bourbon flying pretty early. But so are they done? Right? Because let's just kind of talk about your article that you put up. So you've been back. I think you have 2 articles already up on The Athletic. Buffalo Sabres section there, right? One was on Topias Leinonen, who loved it, loved getting the quotes from Seamus Kotick, for those who are unfamiliar with him, longtime Sabres goaltending development coach, great human being, good guy, very good with young players for sure. And I think he's committed to, seeing this through with Leinonen, despite some challenges that he had the past 2 years. So if you haven't read that article, definitely head over to The Athletic and check that out. I thought that was nicely done by Matthew. But more importantly today, I think it was today, right, Matthew? You put up, 6 lingering questions for the Sabres coming into the season. And I think the big one, the hot topic, and it kind of goes back to what we were saying, like, are they done, building the team? Because, one of the questions is, are they going to use this salary cap space that the Sabres have? So you kind of go back through the offseason, right? Sabres spent some money this year. They tidied up some business with re-signing UPL. So 5-year, 4.75 per million.
Correct.
Per year deal. So a good move there to kind of sturdy up the crease. We can talk a little bit about goaltending down the road, but they spent some money, right? We already did the free agency acquisitions that they made, but they still have, what's the number? About $8.5 million. And really, I think, I guess the question is, are they going to go into the season with this 8.5 left that they could spend? Or are they still trying to make moves, right? Is there still a move they can make? Are there a couple forwards that they could maybe move out to go get a big ticket guy? But, I think this was all predicated, this whole thought that they were going to spend a little bit more aggressively on a couple thoughts, right? They hire Lindy Ruff and they're like, it's winning now, right? But then also the whole Jeff Skinner buyout. And there's some cap savings there with Skinner being bought out that they seemingly have not used. So what's your just take on this whole $8.5 million? I mean, I don't think, I'll tell you just real quick. I don't think that they were going to spend to the cap. They haven't spent to the cap in several years. I didn't expect them to. I don't think I expected 8.5 sitting out there, but I don't think it's the end of the world that they haven't used it all yet, because I wasn't expecting them to. And I kind of like the team that they have right now, at least going into it. Some things need to happen, obviously, but where are you at? And what are you hearing? Whether it's from your peers at the Athletic comments section, I'm sure is on fire. I haven't gone through that. I didn't have a lot of time today, but I can guarantee the world's on fire about that 8.5. Am I right?
It seems like a point of frustration, and I think rightfully so. I think it is tied to the Jeff Skinner discussion. Like we mentioned at the time of the Jeff Skinner buyout, financially, it made more sense if you waited another year because you weren't, eating more dead cap years beyond what you needed to. Now you're eating, extra for 3 years after you would have been paying him. But my point at the time was that opening up that 7.5 million, opening up that spot in the lineup in the short term, if there's a team that should be thinking short term, it's a team that has the longest playoff drought in the history of the league. I don't mind short term thinking. I really don't, because for a million different reasons, you need that playoff drought to stop. It would change a lot if you could get that to stop. So freeing up the space, moving out a player that probably didn't fit well with the way Lindy Ruff wants to play or the traits that Lindy Ruff values, doesn't really fit lower in the lineup as we saw later in the season. All of it, it made sense. But when you move out a player like that, one who has been very productive at 5-on-5, a guy that is a proven goal scorer, even in a down year last year, and then you don't use the money and don't necessarily replace the production either, I think the frustration is warranted. To your point, I don't have a major problem with their roster at the moment. I think they are a better team now than they were at the end of the season. I like what they've done in the bottom 6. I like the speed that they've added and the physicality that they've added. I think the question is a two-part question for me is what are you going to do with that salary cap space? And do you have enough scoring? Because you lost one of your best goal scorers in Jeff Skinner. And you replaced him essentially. The best replacement is Jason Zucker, who is not on the same level as an offensive player. So you're banking on bounce back seasons from Tage Thompson, Alex Tuck, and Dylan Cousins in particular. You're banking on Jack Quinn to stay healthy and take a step. And you're hoping that JJ Peterka can repeat or build on what he did last season. A lot of variables, I think all of those are banking on Lindy Ruff in a sense, right? That a different playing style and a different, voice behind the bench will get more out of this group. But the more I've been thinking about the salary cap situation, the more I kind of zoom out and think of it as a multi-year situation, because to your point, the micro of it, it's like, what moves could they have made this summer? Not a lot of big ticket players. They could have spent more in free agency and tried to really break the bank for like a Jake DeBrusk or something like that.
Might have put themselves in trouble with one of the in-house guys that they like, right?
It could have created some problems down the road. I think, Patrick Kane is somebody we've brought up a lot. That's one that, he wanted to stay in Detroit. Patrick Laine obviously got moved. That's one that you're sort of, it's like a different flavor of Jeff Skinner in a sense. Some of the same problems. I don't know.
I
if it would have been.
I wasn't in on Line A for.
I like
the
Laine.
Sabres to be in on him.
I didn't think it made the most sense. But I think if you zoom out and look at it as a multi-year salary cap planning situation, that's where I think the criticism is warranted. Going back a couple of years, they've been sitting on this amount of salary cap space year after year after year. So when you move out Casey Middlestat because he's got a contract coming up, in the micro, you can say, okay, maybe they don't want to pay him that much money on the long term, but you've got to spend money on somebody. And, the number I had in the story I wrote today was that the playoff team that had the most cap space last year was the Capitals, who snuck into the playoffs, and they had about 1.4 million in cap space. So teams that make the playoffs spend money. It's been a flat cap in the NHL. Most teams in the league are using all sorts of, loopholes of sending guys down or long-term injured reserve, trying to find every penny that they can. And the Sabres have been sitting on cap space. Very rarely have they used it to acquire assets, right? Take on bad contracts. There were short-term moves over the last few off seasons that could have been made. It's kind of the point we made when we discussed free agency, is that there was so much business to be done that almost no matter what Kevin Adams did, it felt like he was going to come up short because there was just too much to do in one off season when they really didn't do much last off season or the off season before. So it remains to be seen whether they have another move in them before the start of the season. They will have plenty of flexibility if they want to make a trade in season, but that is not always easy to do. So we'll see what comes available, but they are opening themselves up to criticism by not spending that money. And yes, there's frustration from fans and, people in the comment section. And I understand it, because if you're in win now mode, usually you're spending more than the Sabres are spending.
I didn't expect them to spend the money, for a couple of reasons, I guess. Number one, they haven't recently. Number two, the arena hasn't been full. And I do think that there's an element of, I don't know what's the right way to put it. I just don't think they're as cash flush as maybe you'd think that a professional franchise normally would be. They haven't had any playoff revenue in forever. They haven't been selling out the building. The gate revenue is not there. Operating expenses have gone up. I don't know if corporate, we talk about just like regular Joe Q public walking up and buying a ticket, but I don't even know if like the corporate gate is there either. I don't think that it is. Just from my sense of being connected to parts of Buffalo business, I don't feel that it is. It is for the Bills. It might not be for the Bills moving forward, by the way. But I don't know. But going back too, I think that Kevin Adams is going to be measured here. I think that he is, operating the same way that maybe I look at the team. I said that I'm okay with the roster because I do think that Cousins is going to have a better year. I think Tage has to have a better year. I don't think he's going to have this crazy good year like he had where he almost hit 50, but he's going to have a better year, I believe. Staying healthy, right, is the wild card with all these guys. I think Jack Quinn's going to have a good year. It's those guys. Tuck, I don't know. But if you get 3 of those 5 guys to have better years, I think you're going to be in a good shape. Kevin Adams could go and look at 2 years ago. He has to figure out, was 2 years ago what this team really is? Where they missed by what, 1 point? It really felt like they missed by like a couple, right? Because then they win like the last game and it was kind of like garbage. It was like Blake Bortles 2 points that they got, right? But was that an anomaly or is that really what this team is? And if this team gets off to a good start, he's got money to spend. And you have guys like Krebs and Greenway that if they're not showing that they fit in what Lindy Ruff's doing, you got maybe they need a month and a half with Lindy Ruff to see who really fits what this style of play is going to be, what this team's going to be, to know who's in, who's out. And maybe you make a trade and you're still winning games and you're competitive. I don't know. I guess I can see where that's, if you're on maybe this limited, but I don't want to say internal cap because I don't want to trigger people, but it feels like they have an internal cap. And by the way, when you buy out Jeff Skinner and you have that, you lose that, you have that cap hit, that's a nice excuse to not spend money, isn't it? So it's, if you have an internal cap.
I think to your point, and it's a legitimate one about, the building not being full. This is a gate sport, right? That's where your revenue comes from.
And I'm not putting it on the fans, by the way. I just want to be clear. I'm not putting it all on the fans.
No, because it's
just a fact.
Right. And it started at, around the pandemic is when they stopped spending to the cap, right? But there were some strategic reasons for that, a youth movement and, different things of that nature. But that is when it started. And that's also when the attendance problems have sort of crept in. And that was also around year 10 of the playoff drought. So all of these things, it's all part of the same gumbo that has caused the problem here. It's, you fill the building when your team is good. You build a good team by spending money in a lot of cases. Having players worthy of spending money on helps, and that's what they're trying to do. That's why I do believe that in the future, they'll be closer to the cap. But it's important to remember, too, that the cap is going up, right? So all these guys that they think they have to save money for, that doesn't really impact, a 1-year deal you could have done this year, or the cap will keep going up. But the attendance thing is certainly part of this, but definitely the temperature seemed to change around the pandemic. They've even gotten to the point where the Sabres and the Bills are operating more separate, right? And the Bills are flush with cash. They're in the NFL. I mean,
that league's an ATM. Yeah.
You print money in that league and it's not dependent on gate. There's massive TV deals. Also having no playoff revenue for basically the entirety of Terry Pegula's ownership, the Sabres, is massive, right? So that's where, sure, the fans, I guess, have not been providing revenue in terms of ticket sales the last 4 or 5 years. But whose fault is it that there's no playoff revenue, right? I mean, that's not on the fans. So they would be, packing that place and packing the streets around it if there was ever a playoff game. So it is a weird situation where that's why I say it's so important to end the playoff drought for so many different reasons. That, the short-term thinking is totally fine by me because there's business component to it. There's you have a damaged fan base, a damaged relationship between the team and the fan base. And so you don't get the benefit of the doubt when you're sitting on the money, right? You don't get the benefit of the doubt that you're going to spend it or that you're going to make some big move that fans have been waiting for a while. And it's even presumptuous to an extent to assume that all of these players are going to warrant big deals, right? That Bo Byram and JJ Paterka and Jack Quinn and Devin Levi are all going to be home run hits. We don't know that. So you're planning for something that isn't certain. But I think to the point of in the short term, if there's not a move that makes sense, you're also not going to spend the money for the sake of spending the money, a la a Patrick Laine type move, if you don't feel like it's a good fit. That's why I call it a multi-year problem, because there were a lot of chances to spend money, the Patrick Kane situation, you could go down the list of, Timo Meyer didn't work out in New Jersey, but that was a trade that was out there to be made. I mean, there's been, DeBrincat has moved a couple of times. There's been opportunities to spend money and shake up your team that they haven't taken. And so now they're at a spot where they're sitting on 8.5 million. They did have to fix the roof in the building. They got a new scoreboard, and all that. So,
I want to know what that stuff cost, honestly,
well,
because
it's
we had a
not cheap.
conversation, right? Well, so we talked about operational expenses for a team, right? And there was citing, it wasn't Forbes, but it was another entity that does all these statistical researches on sports franchises and what it takes to run a team. And I think they said operational expenses were about 70 million. That's what we were talking about on average. Well, when you have to fix a roof and building maintenance and a new scoreboard, you're adding to that because that's not an annual expense that you're making. I want to know what that cost. Is there a way to find that out? I wonder if we can find that out.
Probably. And in the case of the roof, it needed to be fixed. Like, it was leaking.
Oh my God, yeah.
It was leaking, right? Like,
Yeah.
so that's not like, the scoreboard. I think Terry Pagula can say, look at what I've done here, or given you, right? This fancy new toy. The roof was just a necessity, right? That it was leaking at the end of the year.
It's crazy.
So, not dramatically or anything, but there was fans sharing some videos, and I had it in the press box at one point. But so it is like a evidence that he's spending money, but part of it is just a necessity to keep the place functional. And the scoreboard was outdated. I don't think the scoreboard, I never walked into the arena and thought the scoreboard was a major problem. I know Mike Harrington, that's been his personal crusade for a while that they need a new one. And I'm sure the new one will be great. And I'll probably notice the upgrade and think back to how maybe the other one wasn't very good. But all of that stuff is only amplified because they're not good. Like, I don't think, I love, and I know people in Buffalo are kind of this way too. Like, I like the stadium in Orchard Park. I like the hockey arena in Calgary. I liked the Oakland Coliseum, like these places that have character and charm. Like, that's Buffalo. So, like, you can overlook some of the warts of a building if you've got a winner on the ice. And that's the problem. That building has now been associated for almost half of its life with a horrible product on the ice. And so then if you see some water dripping down, or a lackluster scoreboard, or concessions that aren't up to par, you get even angrier. So it's a vicious cycle that's hard to break. The only way you break it, I think, is winning, or making the types of moves that show you're serious about trying to win. It's not a situation where you're automatically going to win if you spend to the cap. We saw that for the first, 9 or 10 years of the drought, but it certainly doesn't hurt. And it will be interesting to see. You had a coach before in Don Granato who was very keen on playing young players, putting them in situations to develop on the fly. I'm curious to see how Lindy Ruff will feel about that. in not all these guys are super young anymore, but Zach Benson is, right? And some of these prospects like Yuri Kulik and maybe even Konsta Helenius, who has a pretty NHL ready skill set, are they going to be, is Lindy Ruff going to be as eager to insert some of those players into big roles? I think, that's a question too.
Yeah, we'll have to get into that because I think there's a probably, that works into the Peyton Krebs discussion. I just want to circle back real quick to a couple of things that we were just talking about, like with revenue and everything else, because I think everyone has a theory on why they're not spending. Maybe it's part of the build, like the business plan that they had, where they're drafting. They had all these young players, draft, develop, get them in, pay them, retain them. Kind of like, because you've already seen them do that with some of the young guys that they've already picked, nurtured, developed. Samuelson, Quinn, Peterka, we're going to see that. I'll get to them in a second. But there's also, going back to the revenue too, that Forbes report, there was a Forbes report that I was mentioning. Sabres were bottom 5. I think that a lot of people know this, but just to reset it, 159 million in revenue. This was in 2023. So this is a report from about 8 months ago. The top of the league, Edmonton, Toronto, 281 million in revenue. LA Kings, 279 million. Sabres, 159 million. Big gap there. Big gap. A lot of dollars.
And a lot of that is attendance. They've been close to the bottom in attendance.
That's my point.
Right?
That's my point. So because the only the teams below them, so Buffalo is 159 million, San Jose 158, and then you have Columbus 151, and then Ottawa and Arizona 128 and 120.
Well, I mean, Arizona was in the predicament of having 4,000 people in their building.
They could have sold it out every night. Yeah,
which exactly. I think they did.
Yeah,
but that's like selling out the Northtown Center.
But and there's more to do in Arizona besides go to a hockey game, and in some of these other places. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, I think that you can see, it's like the confluence of all these factors. No revenue. Maybe it was part of the plan. Everyone has a theory, but we're not going to know because Jeff Skinner buying, like, why do they buy out Skinner to do it? Right? Like, it's. I think you could look at the player and who he is and say, yeah, he doesn't fit, so you buy him out. If the Sabres, here's my issue. The Sabres can go, they can start the year, 12-4. Okay. And it's not going to solve the gate. People aren't just going to start going to the games right away, right? It's going to take some time. It might take more than a season. Okay.
It might.
To get that gate revenue back.
I truly think it will take playoffs.
It's going to take a long time.
Because,
right?
So I started on the beat 2022, 23, right? And there were moments where all I've heard from so many people, really even since I moved to Buffalo back in 2014, about everybody talks about 05, 06, 06, 07, like what this town is like when the hockey team is good. And it felt like there were very small glimmers of that in the 2022-23 season. You had Ryan Miller night. You had some of these games that it was like, wow, this place is packed. People were excited about that team.
Good RJ ceremonies.
The right? RJ ceremony. Yeah. So there was, moments. Jack Eichel coming back, the place, filled up, but it was few and far between, but it was like, okay, these people are ready for when this team is good. And then early in the season, I remember having conversations in the press box with, people like Matt Bove, Jonah Bronstein, thinking, man, this team, like there's some hype around this team. Everybody's picking them to be a playoff team. And early in the season, I mean, you had the good crowd against the Rangers. They didn't play well. And after that, it was like, man, this place, it's not full. And so to your point, they could start out hot, but it's going to take at least until the end of football season, I think, before you see people really believe that they got to be good when the Bills are done for people to say, okay, what's going on downtown with that hockey team? I think
that's obviously the start of it. Yeah.
You have the diehards, right? You have the people that are here in the chat with us, like listening to us every week. You have your core group. There's times I look around the arena last year, the way they were playing, and thought, man, there's like 10,000 people here. I can't even believe there's 10,000 people here. But given the state of the team and the state of the franchise, like there are people who really care. But to get a whole community to buy back in, it's going to take a serious playoff push. It's going to take a good team.
Where I was going with this is that we'll know whose theory is right, because the gate revenues, it's like, it's going to take time. That's a multi-year thing to get that bank built back up. Okay. But if they're like not a lot of cash flow, like if there's cash flow issues in that business or whatever, you'll know if they get through this season and they're at this stalemate with Paterka, or if Jack Quinn has a good season and they're at a stalemate with him, as long as their asks aren't like outrageous, like crazy unreasonable. Because like I said, with Skinner, it's easy to make a connection for why maybe he doesn't fit, why they didn't want him here, and why they bought him out. And maybe it wasn't a financial decision. Well, if you don't want to pay Paterka and Quinn, I'm not saying they won't. Look, they've proven that they want to. They'll pay the guys that they want to pay. So I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way.
No, but I think
you know where I'm going. So right, if they play hardball with these young guys, if Paterka scores 30 and Quinn scores 30, could happen, by the way. And
well, what's interesting about the Skinner piece of it is that while maybe they don't spend the cap, they're still paying him, but they're only paying 2/3. So like of his remaining salary, right? Even though the cap, there's funny numbers after his deal would have expired, from a purely cash flow perspective, it's a net savings, not just on the cap this year. You are paying 2/3, and that's a significant number. So I don't know what a scoreboard costs, but maybe that helps. The Paterka and Quinn and Devin Levi and Bo Byram situations that are upcoming, I think it's a good point by you, because we saw in the past, and part of this I think is the situation of the players, right? You want JJ Paterka to show it again. You want Jack Quinn to stay healthy. You want, you're still very early in the fact-finding mission of Devin Levi and Bo Byram in terms of how much they've played for you. But a lot of those other deals got done before, right? This was the time they got done, the summer before. Tage Thompson signed that deal. Dylan Cousins in season. Owen Power before the season. Rasmus Dahlin before the season. So the hesitancy, I think, is partly hockey related, but, it's going to be interesting because the cap is going up and agents are very excited about this, right? And they're not going to let their clients take big discounts. And so there is a roll of the dice in a sense by letting JJ Paterka play another season, letting Jack Quinn. Now,
the
Jack
Sabres
Quinn
want the cap to go up.
Jack Quinn is probably sitting there saying, he probably didn't want to get too deep into contract negotiations since he knows he could put a better, total on the ice, in terms of production. But it's going to be, we'll learn a lot, to your point. The actions say absolutely everything in this scenario. And that's why, I understand all of the questions and the concerns from fans about what are they going to do with this money. And I understand the skepticism, because I don't know if there's another team in the league that has earned skepticism the way the Sabres have. And so it's fair. It goes both ways, right? There's, you pay to build a winner, and people here, I think, will support it. But you have done a lot of damage to the fan base, to the idea that this is a hockey town. You've done a lot of damage to that over the last 13 years, and it will not be repaired by an early winning streak. But if they make the playoffs with Lindy Ruff as their coach, that's gonna hit a lot of people in their feels, right? That there's going to be people flooding back into that place, and I do believe that will solve a lot of problems. It won't solve all their problems, but it'll solve a lot.
That's why Lindy Ruff is the head coach and vice president of marketing for the Buffalo Sabres.
Right.
That should be his business card. So there's a couple other topics that we want to talk about today. We're already like 40 minutes into this. We got, a 3-minute delay, and then we kind of had to fart around getting, links sent or whatever. But anyways, the Sabres have paid guys. Okay. So I don't want to sit here and say, oh, they're broke. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying, like, when you look at some of these charts, I still have that Forbes chart up, and it says astonishing. It's a bar graph, like You can't see me. Edmonton's like all the way over here, and Buffalo's like really here. But anyways, but then, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, let's just talk about him real quick because Sabres have a goaltending situation now. And I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on this because I think we should probably talk, also just about maybe that Krebs and that final roster spot and all that. And I want to get to that before we finish today. But hey, by the way, before we begin, like this video. Okay, there we go. I had to get that plug.
You got to tell people about the voicemail line.
Oh, yeah.
We forgot to give out our phone number.
Yeah, so if you like or hate the Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen signing, for example, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen signing, we do have a voicemail line now you can set up. We're going to figure out how to play them on the show as well, the good ones. If you're entertaining, I think certainly that would help. But you can see it on the crawler there. So 716, put this in your phone, 716-202-9153. You can drunk dial us. Leave us a message and we'll do a segment on the show, maybe at least once a week. Hopefully, if we get some action on there, maybe we get flooded with your feelings and it's every show. We'll see. But 716-202-9153. That is the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show hotline, voicemail line, group therapy line, whatever line. Doesn't have to be about hockey. Leave us a message and we'll play it on the show. We're going to figure out how to do that. I think I have a way to do that. But anyways, long story short, let's go back to hockey. And so, last season, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, really good second half. Sabres rewarded him, I think, really for that second half with a 5-year deal. So he's going to be here until he's 29 years old, unless they move him out. I mean, he's scheduled to be here until I think he's 29. And so now you have him, right? And we know that he likes to play a lot. And then you have this guy, I don't know if you heard him, named Devin Levi, who started the first couple of games of the season last year. Wasn't he the guy? Didn't he play the first 4? Yeah, first 4 games of the season.
Had to get the feeling of the season, was the get used to the grind. And then he got hurt.
And then he got hurt. So the grind really wore him down. He got ground down.
Yeah.
And went down to Rochester
from there. Yeah.
Well, things got weird, but I mean, the best story that came out of the season last year was probably Luukkonen. Obviously, Peterka was good. Luukkonen was good. Benson didn't light the world on fire, but a nice surprise, right? But really, when you boil that whole season, it's Luukkonen. I think that was a storyline. Gets rewarded. So the Sabres have these 2 young guys, right? Luukkonen, Devin Levi. Devin Levi goes down, by the way, to Rochester midstream last year, and for all intents and purposes was very good. Very good. Some nights, great. But overall, I would say very good and looks like a guy that, in theory, is your org 2. Sabres come out, second day, early on in free agency. You corrected me last time. I thought it was like a week past in free agency, but it was really actually pretty close to the start of free agency when the Sabres signed James Reimer, who hasn't seen the AHL in a long time. So journeyman NHL goaltender, nice insurance plan there for a couple fronts, right? If Levi's not ready, if Luukkonen gets hurt, if Levi and Luukkonen get hurt, oh my God, could you imagine? I can hear the Sabres fans' heads blowing up here on September 6th with that thought. But what are we thinking here with the goaltending? Levi right now could certainly be a guy that overtakes Luukkonen this year and gets a contract. Who knows? I mean, they could be paying they could have a lot of money invested in goaltending here pretty quick. But what's your thought on just the contract that Luukkonen got first and foremost, but then the situation with those 3 coming into the season?
Luukkonen's contract is solid. I think it's a nice deal for Luukkonen, right? I think it's a little bit higher in average annual value than maybe I expected. Just a little bit. I was thinking it would come in at about 4.5. I think 4.5 was the sweet spot I wrote about. 4 years, 4.5 maybe.
Did we talk about this already?
We
talk about the Luukkonen contract? Okay.
We didn't, because I remember I was in Maine when the news came down. So
you were talking, I was having a flashback. I was starting to hear Gustafson comps.
Well, no, yeah, we did
speculating. Okay.
We did talk about the comps and where it would land. And I think this was maybe a little bit higher, maybe an extra year than I thought.
Yeah.
But I think is there an element of risk involved? Absolutely, right? It's 1/2 season of really strong work, but he has the pedigree as a prospect. He, I think, has played well enough to earn a commitment from the organization. He needs to continue to build on that, and that's the case with a lot of these contracts that they've signed guys to, is they're betting on guys building on it and living up to it. But I don't think it's such an egregious number that he's untradeable if you get to that point in a few years where Levi passes him and you feel like you need, some more financial flexibility or whatever the case may be. So they were in a spot, I think, where this was their best option, is to keep him. And probably, I mean, could they have played hardball with him? Sure, right? You could have taken him to arbitration and but I think the number would have landed in this neighborhood. And obviously, as we have discussed, this is not a team short on cap space. So there was not a major need to play hardball in this situation. The rest of the goalie picture is interesting though, because Devin Levi is, I think, the organizational number 2, but what that means might be, a little bit up in the air depending on how he plays and depending on how Luukkonen plays. How many games is Luukkonen going to play? He did really well when he was able to get into a rhythm and play a bunch of games last year, and you don't want Devin Levi just sitting on the bench not playing for long stretches. So does that mean that Reimer keeps the seat warm and Levi gets his games in the AHL and comes up when Luukkonen needs a breather? Or, is there some wiggle room, I guess? Do you send Reimer, who would likely pass through waivers on the $1 million number, down to Rochester and do more of a 60-40 split? So Levi is feeling the rhythm of the NHL season. I think that remains to be seen. And it's a pretty big wild card because Lindy Ruff is a much different coach than Don Granato. And, certainly the goalie question is, you're talking about a young goalie in Levi, and goaltending is probably the reason that Lindy Ruff is here to begin with. The goaltending that New Jersey got last year kind of doomed him and ended up costing him his job. So I think Levi will get quite a bit of games. I think, to your point, I thought he had a really strong AHL season. I thought he looked much better after having been down there when he did come up in some games later in the year than he did early in the year.
Yeah.
And now we'll see where he's at when he gets to camp. And I would expect, they have a back-to-back right out of the gate, with the Devils and Prague. So you would think that it's Luukkonen and Levi if both are healthy.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of like the shuttling, but I think it does solve a lot of the issues. It's probably the most practical thing to do, honestly, is because part of me wants, like, Luukkonen's the guy coming into the season. Still has to prove it, by the way. He still has to prove that he's the guy. He's paid to be the guy. He has to prove it to keep that net, though. I like Levi on his heels, pushing him. Like, hey, I'm right here. You let a couple bad ones in, I'm right here. I like that whole thought. And we know that Luukkonen doesn't always thrive with that. Right? It's got to be like, it's like when it's his team and he's like the guy, he's anointed the guy. He takes the job and he runs with it at most levels he's been at. Sudbury, right? You learned that when you did your story when he was up in Sudbury. But I like Levi nipping at his heels. He can also nip at his heels by going down and having a .935 save percentage in Rochester, an hour down the 90. And come up and spell. So it's probably the most practical thing. It probably is. I love, I don't want a goalie controversy, but you need to. And James Reimer is not an answer. So someone's already calling the line. That's good. Man, my phone does ring, by the way. So that's good. Unless it's spammer. I was getting some spam calls on there. But what I was thinking though is, I'm ready for a Levi Luukkonen tandem. I'm ready for Levi to be here full time pretty soon, but it is practical. I think it makes sense to have him start down there. And it also impacts the number of defensemen that you carry on the roster in all likelihood too. Because if you're going to keep bringing Levi up, You know what I mean? Like you're not gonna have a guy to like, you're gonna be pushing roster limits, right? Dennis Gilbert's gonna be up. They're gonna want him around. Like there's a dynamic there to talk about, right? With how you can freely bring Levi up and not send someone down.
Unless it's Reimer, right? Unless it's back and forth on paper with
So,
Reimer, but
and on Reimer, well, here's the thing on Reimer though. Like, I think you're right. The Sabres have to be really keen with whatever goaltending situation is in the league. If a team has a goalie catastrophe in training camp, like a problem, 2 guys get hurt, Reimer's going to get claimed if they try to waive him.
yeah, $1 million, is high, but it's not. I mean, he's played okay the last, last
He gets
year.
a job every year and he
He played
plays every
okay.
year.
Yeah, he plays quite a bit. So, it's not bad to have him. I don't think. I mean, it's not to have a little bit of insurance, because we saw last year they didn't really have any, right? Levi gets hurt. Eric Comrie gets hurt. Eric Comrie doesn't necessarily play well when he's in there anyways. And if not for Luukkonen really catching fire, it would have been a goaltending problem last year. So I understand the idea of bringing a veteran in to give you a little bit of insurance in case of injury, but I do think sooner rather than later, your best case scenario, obviously, is you end up with an Ullmark Swayman type of tandem.
I'm ready for it. That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
that's what everybody in the league wants, right? And I think stylistically, you have goalies that kind of match those profiles. Luukkonen being your Ullmark and Levi being your Swayman. But as we saw in Boston, that creates its own problem when you are spending to the cap and you are trying to fit both of them in. They had to move on from Ullmark, and they had to constantly plan ahead, right? They have a goalie that they're ready to bring up. They also have Korpisalo, so that they've got, but they also need to get Swayman under contract too, which is an interesting divisional storyline to follow. But goaltending, I wouldn't say is solved in Buffalo, but I think there's reason to be optimistic about Luukkonen. And I think your point about Levi nipping at his heels, I think it's good. And I don't have too much of a concern about, like we said, he likes to have ownership. He likes to feel like it's his team, like he's the guy, that everybody believes in him. And that's when he plays the best. I don't feel like the competition from Levi will impact that feeling, because all Luukkonen will need to do is look at his bank account, right, and his paycheck.
Yeah, well,
right,
and it's the NHL, buddy. Like,
well, that's the thing. You need to
yeah.
learn how to deal with that, first of all. But second of all, if you're feeling insecure, just look at your bank account, right? Just look at those checks coming in, and I think that gives you a level of security that is important. And I don't know that he's a guy that. And this will be a question, because it's a question anytime somebody signs a big contract. Is there that sigh of relief, right? Is there, a little bit of the foot coming off the gas? That's why Devin Levi is important, because, hey, you might have signed that contract, but the superstar prospect is right here. We know how the organization feels about him, and we've seen in flashes that he's pretty close to being ready. So it'll be an interesting situation to follow all season, but a more stable one for sure than they had last season.
Jeremy Swayman only played 14 AHL games before becoming a full-time Boston Bruin.
He's one of the rare examples, when I did that story last year, of guys that were in Devin Levi's situation. And that one felt, that one was different in the sense that he was coming up to back up Tuukka Rask, right? Or what? No, he was backing up. Was it Rask at the time or Ullmark still?
I think it was Ullmark.
I think it was Ullmark. But, playing behind one of the best defensive teams in hockey and within a lot of structure.
That's what I was going to say. It's easier to bring a goalie up like that when you have a team.
I think what it was
defensively.
I think they brought Rask back, didn't they? And then he
was like practicing, and but I mean,
he
Ullmark
played a couple games and it did not go well. And then, so I think some of those AHL games actually were because of that. Like Swayman got, I think there was, if I have that timeline right, somebody in the chat can correct me if I'm wrong there. But yeah, he was one of the very few modern examples of somebody who had done what Devin Levi was trying to do. But even then, Devin Levi was trying to start out of the gate for a team with 0 AHL experience. All the other goalies that had done anything similar came from either the KHL or the Swedish Elite League. Lundqvist, I don't think played a lot of AHL, maybe none at all. I don't have the chart in front of me that I built for that story, but
I think he came right in.
I think he came right in. But again, Swedish Elite League. I think Vasilevsky might have been similar, KHL. So Swayman is sort of the comp you look at for Levi, and I think that'd be best case scenario. I think if you end up with a Jeremy Swayman level of goalie to go with Luukkonen, that's what you want.
I want that all day. So no, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I kind of had an idea where you were. We haven't talked about it on here. You're right. I think we talked about it leading up to what they were going to do, what the number was going to be, what the term would be, but we had not talked about it because that happened in the summer when you were sunning yourself and chasing children around. Let's not do Krebs today. Let's not do the final roster spot today. Let's do that in a couple days when you and I get back together. We got to kind of work the kinks out. And I think let's leave some meat on the bone, but let's go through the chat because we're an hour in and we don't want to be here all day. It's one of the last few nice Fridays. Bills football Friday, by the way, also. Let's just hit the chat and get out of here. And and I can while you're starring a couple things, let me just do a plug for sabresprospects.com. For those that haven't been paying attention on Twitter, I'm kind of resurrecting that website for the first time in many years. I don't know if any of you have noticed. Got some news up there about Prokorpal Topov, Steven Sardarian, Viljami Mariala. I was going to do a Prospect Avenue. We can kind of do that. For those that actually have joined us here today, Mariala's hurt, going to miss about a month. Poltapov was excellent in his KHL season debut yesterday for Seska. Probably their best. Actually, he was their best forward. They do a little player rating system. He was by far their best skater yesterday. Looking really good. Vasily Zalanov is playing with the Green Bay Gamblers. Saw 2 of his preseason games thus far. Luke Osborne for Youngstown Phantoms, 4th rounder from 2024 this past draft. Looks really good. It was nice to see him in like a game setting after a season. Saw him a couple times last year. But now that you know to focus on him because he's a Sabres prospect, man, that kid looks really good. Really good. Young too. Young, but really good. But yeah, a lot going on. Sabresprospects.com. Check it out. I do have Topias Laininen's game tape from yesterday. May cut it up. I may not. We'll see. No guarantees right now. Still trying to enjoy the last little bit of summer. I am on vacation this week, by the way, too. It's my last day vacation. So I don't want to work too hard. You know
Topias
what I mean?
Laininen is an interesting piece to that goalie puzzle we were just talking about, because part of why Boston is able to trade Ullmark and maybe play a little bit of hardball here with Swayman is that they have, guys in the organization that they keep developing, right? They're constantly planning for the next guy. And I think that's, part of it is also how they play defense and, the team structure that they have overall, but you're constantly looking for that, right? And so Laininen is a really interesting piece to the organizational puzzle in net because you used a 2nd round pick on him. Hasn't worked out for a variety of reasons yet, but a long runway still ahead, right? A young goalie. He's had a rough couple of years with injuries and playing time, but now, has a pretty good situation in Sweden. So between him and Scott Ratzlaff and the kid they picked at the end of the draft this year, they are trying to restock that pipeline a little bit. They just need one or more of those guys to hit. It's not something that will be super relevant to the NHL roster for another 3-4 years, but it is worth watching.
Laininen looks good right now. In what I was watching yesterday, looks healthy. That's the most important thing. It's all about his health. There's a lot of takes out there on Laininen. I don't want to make this a prospect. I always say this whenever we're together and I start talking prospects and start nerding out. I'm like, I don't want to make it a prospect podcast, but I'm on Laininen though. He's a better prospect than his past 2 years of statistics show. Is he a guarantee? No. But the biggest thing, it wasn't just the injuries with Lanen, and especially last year when he was in Uvescula and he decided to not come over to the CHL. I think the Sabres wanted him to come play Canadian Junior last year and do the whole Luukkonen thing. He was with a coach there. Coach ended up getting fired, but it was a coach that historically doesn't play young goaltenders. The kid was behind the 8 ball from the beginning. The injury just like was a double whammy. They shit can that coach right before Christmas. New guy comes in, has to right the ship, and he wasn't going to play Laneinen. He wasn't going to play this kid who hadn't played a game all year. So he had 2 sets of coaches that just weren't going to give him an opportunity. The injuries, though, were really the driving factor with all of it. If he stayed healthy, he could have got a couple spot starts and really started to prove himself. He looks pretty good right now. Again, it's second division is a good level for him to play this year, but we'll see where he goes. There's no guarantees. Big year for him. But I have hope for him. I still think he could be a solid prospect. He has some things to work on structurally in his game. Kid is massive.
Very
But
big.
you know, when you play in
Big
the
boy.
NHL, you can't just be massive. You can't just be this big chunk of flesh, with skates on and sit there and think that they're going to get the job done. His footwork needs to be cleaned up. Everything. Well, that's why he's got coach. That's why he develops. He's got a good goalie coach back home. He's got a good one here with the Sabres.
He's lighter, too.
Yeah,
He
man.
has slimmed down. He had a stress fracture last year and then broke his finger in practice. And so right when he was getting back from the stress fracture, he never really had off-season training. It's why he hadn't participated in development camp. But he's definitely better conditioned. He got himself a goalie coach / personal trainer, starting to just mature a little bit too, right? Like some of this was just a realization on his part, I think, that it's time to start acting more like a pro. And, that could pay dividends if he get the goalie that the Swedish team he's playing on, the goalie they had last year, signed a deal with the Flames. So
Calgary.
they have
Yeah.
a good goalie coach. I know Seamus Kodak mentioned that he really likes the goalie coach there and, likes that situation that he's in. So even though it's the second division in Sweden, it's still a good situation for him to play games and, start to put some stuff on tape. Because if you just look at the numbers, they're ugly, right? But you're talking about a goalie coming in cold off of an injury. Seamus was saying, he's like, I stopped looking at the numbers because, one bad game out of the gate, you're a 19-year-old kid coming off an injury, getting thrown in cold. Everybody's in the middle of the season. Your numbers aren't going to recover. And really, the numbers aren't super important when you're 19 and you're looking to see more of the tools and the skill set and the mindset, how he's dealing with things. So big year for him, but I wrote about him this week, so wanted to give a little mention to, as we were talking about goalies, how that all fits into the big puzzle that they're trying to build.
Yeah, he's not done. I think there's a lot of people that already wrote him off. And the last thing I'll say on that, I'm glad that you wrote the story. I'm glad you got the quotes from Seamus because that's the reality of his situation. Those are facts. There's injuries didn't help. There were situations didn't help that he was in, but he still has some time here ahead of him, and he's got a lot of talent. And that's what's important to note. There are some people that just want to look at the numbers and think they know something about what's going on with the kid, and they don't. And that's what pisses me off about when I see some of your peers in the media room that write for other outlets thinking they know. Like that's what really bothers me. And I'm not being like gatekeeping or protecting the prospect. I'm just saying like that's a fact. So I'm glad that you wrote that story because it needed to be out there for people to consume, and they can make their own decisions. But at least they have all the facts in front of them to make their own judgments as fans.
Well, and it is tricky in a. You're talking about like this is so much different than when I covered the NFL and you draft a player and it's like guy's got to perform, right? And he's an adult, he's 22, he's 23, like he's getting thrown into the lineup within a couple of years, he's got to perform. Like they're drafting 18-year-old kids, unfinished products, guys that every situation is so unique. It's been one of the most fascinating parts of this job for me is digging into some of these different situations. Of course, we know all of these picks aren't going to pan out, right? Just because you're picked in the second round doesn't mean he's going to be an NHL starter. And I'm not suggesting that's the case, but to just peel back the layers a little bit and say, gee, why is this kid not putting up numbers? Or why hasn't he participated in development camp? Where does he need to get? There's, Seamus is the one talking to him all the time and trying to get inside his mental state and, the playing time situation and finding the right home for these goalies. A lot of it is, more complicated than meets the eye. So it is a much different landscape doing what you do, evaluate, you're in the weeds watching more of these guys than just about anybody. And, including probably some people on staff for the Sabres, and that context is so important with all these different players because it does take time. It's why I roped Luukkonen into the story because, he became an NHL starter at 24, 25 years old. That's what, 7 years after he was drafted, 6, 7 years after he was drafted. And there was some bumps in the road, probably people who gave up on Luukkonen at various points in his trajectory.
Oh, there were. There were.
And that was before I, was covering this team. But even while I was covering him, I think there were some people that were down on him a bit. He's been mostly up in the NHL since I've been covering the Sabres, but he had some tough times. He had his injuries, and that's where you need to perform when you get your chance. But Leinonen has had some weird circumstances, so I'm curious to see how it goes for him this year. And I know you'll have it covered at on this channel and at sabresprospects.com.
Yeah, we will. We will indeed. Okay, enough about him. Let's let him play and tell his own story from here. The chat. What do we got in the chat? Let's go through this for a few minutes and get out of here. I need to get on the elliptical too, man. Did I put on some pounds this summer? I ate great. I'll have to send you a list of all the restaurants. We kept a list of all the places I went. You got to see this thing. It's ridiculous. I'll throw up one real quick and then I'll let you go. CHB123 says, good to have you guys back. Obviously an easy one. No, it's good to have you guys back. Thanks for hopping in today. And for those that watch this when it's not live later on the YouTube channel, look out for us pretty quickly here in the next couple of days. We're going to come right back at you with one. Go ahead, Matt.
I think this is from William here. Having a coach that can/will now commit all 12 forwards to playing team defense will make a huge difference on the ice, both for team morale and on-ice results. I do think there is, the biggest off-season acquisition really was Lindy Ruff in a lot of ways, because hockey at every level, and it's still prevalent at the NHL level, is such an intensity, effort sport. I think almost as much, and conditioning is roped into that. I don't want to suggest that the Sabres under Don Granato didn't have any of those, that effort. You don't want to question effort necessarily, but intensity, I think, is the thing. There's not another sport that combines the length of schedule, between the length of schedule and the physicality. I think hockey is at an interesting, point where the intersection of those two things makes it challenging over the course of an 82-game season. The other sports that have longer seasons aren't as physical. The sports that are more physical, like the NFL, don't have as long of seasons. So all that to say, if Lindy Ruff can get this team playing hard and being conditioned and outworking teams night after night after night, it will make a difference. I think, to William's point, playing better defense, but not even just that, I think it'll make a difference to the people that are in the building watching, and people watching on TV saying, man, these guys are fast. Like, wow, they're hitting hard on the forecheck. Like, they're getting after it. And I think it'll make a difference in winning, because look, not every night, every night you're not going to have your best. And Don Granato talked about that a lot, finding that B game. I think they will have a much better B game under Lindy Ruff. Will their A game be way better? I don't know. The A game under Don Granato, like the very best games, was pretty good. But they need a better B game, and I think they're going to have a much better B game under Lindy Ruff. And I think that will look at the Flyers last year. Not a very, talented team, not a team that people thought coming into the season was going to be a playoff contender, and they hung around for a long time because they outworked people a lot of nights. And so that's going to be the Lindy factor that'll be worth watching all season.
So I love, and we talked about this in probably the last time we were together before the little break that we had, like the whole Lafferty, Obey-Kubel, Malenstein thing. Biggest benefactor of those guys coming into the lineup, Dylan Cousins. Doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting. That's part of the reason why I think Cousin a big season. My concern is that, man, if one or two of those guys get hurt, Sabres are screwed because they don't have the depth of similar players coming up. But I like the comment of just, that, what was it? William Cager? Was that his name? It's off the screen now, but I do like the thought and how Lindy will use all those guys. Keep throwing them up, man. Let's go.
Rob asks, did some of the Sabres players hold their own informal practices in Europe this summer? And they did. I believe they were in Switzerland. Michael Russo had a note about this in his media day notebook from Prague. Luukkonen and Peterka talking about that. It sounds like Dahlin really spearheaded that. And it doesn't hurt, right? It's not going to get you in the playoffs, but it doesn't hurt to have a guy that I think is your likely captain showing that early leadership. It wasn't the whole team, but it was a lot of the key young players. And it's encouraging that they're taking this whole idea of accountability. They're taking it on themselves a little bit. And there was a behind blue and gold. That's what they call it, right? Beyond blue and gold, behind blue and gold, whatever.
Beyond blue and gold.
The YouTube show is. And there was a word that Lindy Ruff brought up, conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And
Baker Bell talked a lot about that.
I think it's going to be an emphasis. And so to see these guys recognizing and trying to get an early start on some of that certainly doesn't hurt, especially when your captain's gone, right? And, Kyle Okposo would normally maybe be the guy that's trying to, he got the team down to a Bills game before the season started last year and tried to organize these things. It's pretty encouraging to see Dahlin taking that leadership role seriously.
There's one here from, it just reminds me,
about
I kind of like this thought. Well, let's go whipped cream from a cow, because I like the name. If whipped cream from a cow says if Dahlin could take another step into the Makar Hughes level of impactness, that would be huge. Totally agree. Totally has the game to do it. Has the skill, obviously. Has the two-way wherewithal, puck moving ability. Has everything. Has the offense. He's gonna get the power play time. I think the rain's coming down finally. And he's probably going to get the C, right? Little segue into kind of what we want to talk about a little bit too. We're not going to do it all today, but I think that I agree with the thought. There's all these other guys that need to have seasons. I think that Quinn is the guy that can really be the guy. Like if he produces and everyone else, like fractionally improves. If Quinn just takes off, team goes very far. And I feel that way about Quinn because we talked about how we made the team look different when he came back in the lineup last year. But I think that Dahlin, though, it all falls apart if Dahlin doesn't keep elevating his game. I kind of like that whole thing. It's kind of a no-brainer from whipped cream from a cow, but I totally agree on the thought at the same time. It doesn't mean it's not true. Yeah.
He's one of those players
or not important.
He's one of those players that if he gives you what he's given you the last few years, it's not, he didn't, I think, regress in any major way last year. He wasn't perfect, but you would like to see another jump. And to your point, you mentioned Dylan Cousins was going to be a major, have a major benefit from the additions they made on the fourth line. I think Dahlin will get a lot of that benefit as well, because he has not only been their best player the last couple of seasons, he's been their most physical player most nights. He's been the guy stirring it up and expending a lot of energy in that way that maybe he doesn't need to in the same way because of some of the other guys in the lineup. And, I know they're forwards and he's a defenseman, but it all plays together. And I think having some of that insulation around him will be really healthy for his overall game.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I love the fact that, look, and those guys can't let up. Cousins can't let up just because you have these other guys to do that. Dahlin can't let up just because you have these other guys to do that. Kubel and Malenstein and Lafferty are going to actually go out there, do their job, and breed the accountability to get every single guy to get the most out of their physical games that they can possibly give. Ideally. It sounds great here on September 6th, but let's see if these guys actually do it, right? But that's the concept here. Let's keep moving through this chat.
How about this?
Oh, hey, Rob, wait, real quick though, on the captaincy thing. Rob Wise actually, I think, was playing off that whipped cream from a cow. He said Hughes took a big step and he was given the C. I wonder how Darlene will respond when, if I didn't see that, Rob. I wasn't playing off you, but Rob Wise and I often think similarly. I just thought it was kind of funny just scrolling through that. I saw that. That's kind of where my mind was going as well.
I think
Connecting that whole next level.
he's in a better spot than Jack Eichel was, you know, when he got, like, it doesn't feel too early if Darlene gets it. Feels like he's earned it. Feels like that bridge from Kyle Okposo was a healthy one for Darlene. He wouldn't have been ready a couple years ago, but he feels like he's ready now. He felt like the captain at the end of last season, even without the letter on his chest. So it could very much help his game. And I do think there are levels still to come. He's a defenseman. He's very young. I mean, where he's at right now compared to where Victor Hedman was at this point, you know, Victor Hedman found another level as he hit his mid and late 20s. So Darlene is not a finished product. And Lindy Ruff is traditionally pretty good with defensemen. So we'll see what comes of that. But I wanted to shout out, we've got greetings from Serbia here. What do you think of that?
Serbia.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. How do you say? I know Vukic. I don't know what's Momcilo. I like to fancy myself as some kind of international Rico Suave type of, but yeah. But thank you for tuning in from Serbia. I think that commenter has actually commented on this in the comments before. Commenter commented in the comments. Boom. There you go. That's how you know it's time to go.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. That's how you know it's time to go. Let's keep rolling here. Let's keep rolling. We got a few more minutes that we can cruise through. Unless you are done. I threw a couple up. They were more prospecty, so I can kind of get through them quick.
I got one from Mike.
Yeah,
why are the Sabres so scared of Kulich in the lineup as a top 6 option? Didn't we see Dallas thrive with their young scorers, adding depth to the scoring and driving the speed and skill level? I think Kulich is really interesting to watch in camp. What type of jump he has made, because you could say that the Sabres are scared. I don't necessarily think that is the case. I think he has not yet knocked the door down. He's been very good at the AHL level, but the consistency, hasn't always been there. He's still so young, and I've been waiting for him to really knock the door down, which I didn't feel like he did last camp in preseason. So he's one of the most interesting players to watch in camp, I think, because he could provide some of that depth that you're talking about. And, some of that pop at the top of the lineup, or some of the pop on the power play that was missing last year. If he takes that step, this could be an age where you start to wonder, can he, to Mike's point, you see guys around the league at this age jump into the league. So it'll be interesting to see if he's ready.
I think he's ready this year, but he wasn't ready previously.
He was not.
I think he's ready this year. If it's not out of camp, it's going to be shortly after. If he goes down and has to do 10, 15 games, I think he's ready. He's ready this year, ready to make a difference. And we'll talk about that probably next time we get together, because I think it works in a little Peyton Krebs thing too. There was, we'll go back to William real quick. Again, I'll just give you a one word answer on this one. Most likely to see time on the Sabres this year: Ostlund, Wahlberg, or Consta Helenius. It's Helenius for me. Most pro ready. He's got a deeper book of pro hockey resume, and he's physically, I think he can hold up physically. Wahlberg can hold up physically too, and he's got a full season of Swedish hockey. I just think that Helenius, something about that kid, I think he could surprise a couple of people and get a look, even if it's late in the year. Is there anything else?
I think that was it. I agree with you on that, by the way. Another guy that I'm curious to see, we saw what happened with Benson last year. I don't know if Lindy Ruff is going to be as eager to have an 18-year-old jump right into the NHL, but I do think he will be somebody that knocks on the door quicker than people expect because of his competitiveness and his smarts. Two things that helped Benson get there quicker than people thought. He has the toolbox, right? He's already a pretty big guy. I think he's going to be pretty fun to watch here at the Prospects Challenge and early in camp.
Yep. No, I'm with you. I think that's it. Here's one. We'll throw this up. I don't know what the baseline is on this, actually. Higher or lower? Power hits or Bills wins?
That's it's got to be power hits, right? He had to. How many did he have last year?
That's what I mean. What's the baseline? I mean, it's a serious question. Well, here's the thing, though. Are the Bills a 9-win team this year. That's a good one. Actually, let's talk Bills for a minute.
Are the Bills a 9-win team? Where's
I think
hit?
they're
Okay.
9. I think
So
they're 9.
Power had 36 hits at 5-on-5 last year. So I think
Okay.
the maybe a bit of a facetious question
Yeah, no,
here
I know,
for,
but I love
but
that though. The idea is I do expect Owen Power to be a little bit more work his way towards being a little more knowing like how big he is and how to leverage his physical gifts. He's not going to be this ass kicker ever,
40
but I
total
think
hits last year. So not
yeah.
a big number. The interesting question might be Sabres wins or Owen Power hits. That might be
Oh,
a
that's a good
really,
one.
that might be
Yeah.
a much
Save
closer.
Man, that's a good one. Actually, that's a one to track. That's a good one.
Yeah.
East I love the thought though. I mean, you're basically getting us thinking about Power and what the next step of his development looks like here. We can still call him a developing player, even though he's up here in Buffalo. Real quick on Rob Wise, and then we'll bounce out here. We're already at an hour 20. Poltapov looks like a unique player, at least in comparison to Sabres' other prospects. Who do you think his comparable is? Yeah, Rob, I sent Rob a note back on Twitter. I don't know if you saw it. There's things that he does. It's not the best comparison. There's things that he does though. Net driving, sometimes carrying, like how he carries the puck in the zone and gets around defensemen and finds teammates that are like Barbashevy. And it's only because they're where they make their impact in the house and around the circles. It's just there's something there. It's not the best comparison because Barbashev has always been very good defensively, in my opinion. And I think that's where Poltapov is lacking. His coach even said it yesterday. He's still got some things to work on defensively, but he's coming around. But that's it's not the best comparison, but there's things that pop. There's things that he does that pop out. And I've always liked Barbashev, and I think I've made that comment before in the past. Yeah, Poltapov's good, man. Like, he and Wahlberg and, there's one other one that I'm missing that I just think they have this game. They just have this. They're gamers. They're dogs. They're
Yeah,
dudes.
that's all right. You need some of
That
those
yeah,
that also have skill, right? Because a
yeah.
lot of the junkyard dog type of players that they've added, it's not that they're not skilled. They are fast, but they're not point producers, right? They're going to be down the lineup type of players. You need some attitude. You need some of that guys that, you know, other teams don't want to play against, right? That you're not excited about this guy crashing in on the forecheck.
I throw Zemer into that bucket too. Not as like, Poltapov of those three, Zemer, Wahlberg. Those are those grunt workers, lunch pail guys that have good hands that can score. Those are the types of players that I get excited about because they'll do the work and they're always going to be contributing to the betterment of the team, even if they're not piling up points. Poltapov is for sure the most rambunctious. And I think just Wahlberg has this ability to just lean on guys and grind guys down. I was telling Chris Ostrander, I did a little podcast yesterday. Watch Wahlberg on a face-off when he's at wing. First thing he does, he leans on the guy that he's lined up with just a little bit, just to start depleting their energy. Because he's this big guy, just lean on him a little bit, just push off and just kind of, he's always craving that contact and rubbing on guys and things like that. And he hits him again later in the shift on the boards, and but I just love Poltapov. Go back to the I think it was 2 years ago, the first KHL game that Poltapov was in. Like 10 minutes into his first game, he leaves his feet, takes a guy's head off, gets thrown out of the game. Like immediately just jumps out at you. This guy, he just wants to make a difference. And he made a comment. Go back and look on my X feed about Poltapov. I get excited. I should have looked at the damn comment because I get excited talking about this kid. But he's like, he knows his role. His coach is just like, he knows what his marching orders are. It's like, go be the center of attention, attack the net, make a difference. Like he just gets it. Like, and if he does all that, he'll get points. And he scored
that's
a short goal.
where
Yes, I just love this kid.
most of the points in the league are scored, right? Like from in front of the net. It's a pretty simple formula. And what you had him down for like
Dude, he had 9
30% of
shots
his
on goal. Yeah.
30% of his team shots yesterday, and
Yeah.
technically playing on down the lineup, and he's producing that way. So the KHL is not the NHL, but it's still it's not a bad league.
He had 9 shots on goal in his first 11 minutes of ice time yesterday. and they were all just I mean, 2 were outside of the house, but they were all and in the like the slot, like I think 5 of them were like right in front of the goalie, right at the edge of the crease. He's just there. I just love that. I just love that. I get too excited to talk about this guy. I gotta stop. All right. Hour 24 in. Matthew, last call for our first show back. Final thoughts. Why don't you do your plugs? Where can people find you? Everyone knows where to find you, I think, by now, if they're tuning in to watch us on a Friday afternoon. But just in case there's some new people here or our Serbian friend doesn't know.
You can find me at theathletic.com/Sabres. You find most of my stuff there, and on X at Matthew Fairburn. I've got a call for mailbag questions up at The Athletic. So if there's stuff we didn't cover here or stuff you want to see me expand on in the written word, that's the place to do it. That'll post sometime early next week. Excited about some stories I have in the works, some of which I was chipping away at while I was on break. Couldn't quite totally stop the flow of information on some of these stories, but excited to get over to Prague in a few weeks here. That's coming up before we know it. So a lot of fun stuff coming up. Excited to get back in the rhythm here with you a couple times a week and maybe do a little bit more YouTube exclusive type stuff this year from down at the rink. So keep it tuned into the YouTube channel as well.
716-202-9153. That is the Baker Fairburn Hockey Show. Whatever. We'll brand it something. We should sell that. That's a sponsorship opportunity right there. So make it a segment, people, so we can actually sell that thing. Baker Fairburn Hockey Show is brought to you by nobody. That'll change soon. You can find me, Kris Baker, at Sabres Prospects on X, sabresprospects.com. Again, we're back. There's a depth chart there. There's a system status. We'll have the stats there for the prospects. We'll have a video. It's still being built out, but please go there. We'll talk about what the future might look like and of that site down the road. But I'm feeling good. I'm feeling back. I'm committed to it. And and you can also find me in a couple minutes down in my kitchen pouring a bourbon. For Matthew Fairburn from The Athletic, for the production crew, I think getting rained on. I can't tell because I have the blinds shut. I'm Kris Baker. Thanks everyone for hopping in. We're going to see you again very soon. See you next time.